Hey, what's going on, folks? So, today we have something a little bit different from the norm. We got our first guest here at the bar. So, join me in welcoming Ringo winner and the writer of the new Space Ghost comic coming out this May, David Pepose. So, David, let's get started. Who is Space Ghost?
Yeah, for those who don't know who Space Ghost is, the best way that I have to describe it, it's like what if Batman fought crime in the Star Wars universe?
Oh,
He's a character that's got amazing design by Alex Toth. He's got power bands that give him the powers over fire and ice and lasers and force fields. He's got his invisible belt that allows him to turn invisible, as well as a trio of sidekicks, twins Jan and Jace and their pet monkey Blip. And they fight crime across the galaxy, fighting villains like Zorak, Brak, Metalis, and the Council of Doom.
are you drawing on any inspirations from the show? Like, will Sisto stay Brack's brother, or will he go back to
Yeah.
being like a partner?
Yeah, no, 100%. I watched every single episode of the original 1966 run, as well as the 1981 revival and Space Stars, and I read every single comic that Space Ghost had an appearance in. So yes, we're drawing from a lot of research from the original show. That said, you don't need to do any homework to get into our series. I did all the homework for you. This is a brand new continuity, brand new jumping on point, where we're taking all the energy and vibes from the original Hanna-Barbera cartoon and bringing them into the 21st century and with a brand new beginning.
That's amazing. I love that so much because that's he's actually like when you think about it, he's a really cool looking character, like physically imposing. He's
Yeah,
like a Batman in space, and that's
yeah.
some of the art for this off the bat. By the way, the two variant covers that I've seen, oh
Mhm.
my god, wow, some of the most
Thank you.
beautiful artwork I've ever seen.
We're working with some real heavyweights for our covers. We have Francisco Matina,
Okay.
we have Jay Lee, we have Bjorn Barons, and we have Michael Cho. And
Oh.
really, they are just the Four Musketeers. They are doing such a sensational job. So any cover you pick up for Space Coast, you really can't go wrong.
Yeah. So, what made you specifically hone in on Space Ghost?
Yeah. So Dynamite approached me with the book. They had just announced a new partnership with Warner Brothers Discovery to do a line of licensed comics. I've done a lot of work over at Marvel. I recently just came off of a Punisher miniseries. I did Moon Knight City of the Dead before that. And so those two books, I think, got me on Dynamite's radar to do Space Ghost. And so they approached me at New York Comic Con and said, hey, we have this book and we would love it if you had a take on it. And so for me, the thing that was so exciting about this is Space Ghost really is he's unexplored territory. He really hasn't had a whole lot of comics appearances. So for me, it was being able to take the energy and vibes of those original cartoons that only lasted about 5 minutes a pop, and being able to use the comics runway to dig in even deeper than anyone's been able to do before.
Yeah, because I mean, one of the biggest realizations that I had was when reading Space Ghost comics was finding out that Zorak is like a race of like bugs. Like there are a lot of different, like there's a lot of them. They come in
Yes,
swarms. It's
yes.
like whoa.
I mean, I know appearances, from of Zorak where yeah, he's got praying mantis henchmen. And so for us, the Alex Toth was throwing out fastball after fastball with each of these character designs, and that did a lot of heavy lifting in a show that didn't really have a lot of time to explore anybody's
Yeah.
backstory or motivations. And so for us, we're really trying to find different ways to kind of take those vibes and really play them up and figure out new wrinkles to kind of organically populate all these villains across the universe. Somebody like Brak, for example, is not a universe conqueror. He's more blue collar. He's somebody who's looking to rob the nearest gold freighter. And so how do we kind of play up that opportunistic streak? So we've got a really cool twist on him. Same thing with Zorak, where as a praying mantis, he strikes me as somebody who he's the one villain that makes Space Ghost scared because he's got this inherently alien perspective on the way that he views the universe. And so, how do we lean into that? How do we kind of play up, his sort of alien motivations and really make him a threat for Space Ghost? And we're doing that for all the iconic villains. We're doing a lot of done-in-one stories for this series, so that way, every month that you pick up an issue of Space Ghost, you know you're going to get a cool self-contained story. And the handful of times that we do a two-parter, when you see to be continued, that means that Space Ghost is facing off against his most dangerous enemies. He's in dire straits, and he's going to have to fight twice as hard to make it out alive the other side.
I love that so much. First of all, the design for Brack, like changing it from being like a mask and helmet to him actually being like a cat person pirate, like I like that a lot. That is taking like a design that was so simplistic and actually making it part of him. And when I first saw that, I was completely blown away.
I mean, that's been what's been so great about working with Dynamite and Warner Brothers is that they've been really encouraging for us to take as many big swings as possible. They know that there's no continuity, there's no backstory to any of this, and so they've been really encouraging and saying, follow your instincts, figure out what's the most dynamic and character-driven way of approaching this. And so Jonathan has really taken that ball and run with it, particularly with the villain designs. I've already seen a handful that he's done already, and they're really sensational.
So, like, knowing your background as an ex-crime reporter, have you been able to draw on your experience for Space Ghost? Because when I was reading City of the Dead,
Yeah.
I like City and Punisher, like the fact that you first of all made a whole new Punisher, and
Yeah.
that is daring in itself, taking over from Fred. Because like when I
Sure.
was first, I was like, a family man is the Punisher. I'm like, whoa, 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 okay. And
Mhm.
I could definitely see your influence as a reporter. So
Yeah, for me, it's less about the specific beat that I was on. I covered crime and state politics at a rural newspaper in rural Massachusetts. But for me, it was about how do I structure a story, and that I bring to every single story. I write pretty modularly, and I learned that as a journalist is that you'll write, you only have a certain amount of space to tell your story, and so you've got certain paragraphs, and you lay out information in a certain way. And sometimes you'll figure out, oh, this quote, it really, it should be, we're burying it. We need to bump it up. And so you kind of lop off the transition, you'll lop off the end, and you'll kind of rewrite that, and you'll plug it away a little earlier in your story. And that's the same way that I approach writing comics. I'll write a sequence, I'll really like it, but I'll say, oh, it's too long, it's too short, it's in the wrong spot in the script. And so I tend to write pretty modularly in that regard. But yeah, working as a reporter was really helpful for me, just in the fact that like I learned not to be afraid of a blank page. I learned not to be afraid of a deadline. I learned not to be afraid of a page count. And so that's training that I think was indispensable for me. And I think I would never have gotten the nerve to become a comics writer if I hadn't been a journalist first.
honestly, the fact that well, you could see your influence though in everything that you write. Like when I was reading City of the Dead, like all I could think about was you remember there was an old, I don't know, it's a deep cut, old Robin Williams film called Come Whatever May.
No.
There's a movie called Come Wherever May where he commits suicide and he
Oh, what
goes
dreams
in.
become.
Oh, whattever dreams may come. Oh my
Yes.
God.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
whatever dreams may come. Oh God, I'm trying to think of
Yes, I know exactly what movie you're talking about, and yeah, that was one of many influences.
oh my God, man. It was
Inception was another big one. Taken obviously was another
yeah.
big one. But yeah, that's kind of how I tend to approach a lot of my work. Is I try to figure out what would I consider to be quote unquote a comp title,
Okay.
and sort of what's the influence that I'm drawing. So for something like Space Ghost, for example, I'm drawing a lot of influence from things like Batman the Animated Series, Batman the Long Halloween, J.J. Abrams' Star Trek, Lone Wolf and Cub, just to name a few. And by having kind of these influences that I'm drawing from, it really kind of helps inform my take, and it sort of gives me a through line to try to follow, where then I can kind of deviate in new and interesting ways.
So if you had to give me 3 words to describe this comic book, what would you say?
Batman meets Mandalorian.
Oh my God. All right. All right. Wow.
I
Got
live
me.
and die based on the log line.
I mean,
No problem.
wow. That is wow. So where would you see your story arc that you're developing right now? Where would you see it in like a year or two?
Well, the way that we're kind of structuring this story is we're pitting Space Ghost against a gauntlet of his most iconic enemies. But also, this is really the story of how Space Ghost came into the orbit of his sidekicks, Jan, Jace, and Blip. And so we're really seeing a lot of the story through their eyes. They're very much the point of view characters in the way that Kitty Pryde was the point of view character in the X-Men 2 generations ago.
Wow.
And
Okay.
so that is really kind of, I think, the emotional spine of our story, which is how did Jan and Jace go from being these rescued orphans to becoming Space Ghost sidekicks, and then becoming trusted partners, and then eventually becoming sort of this surrogate found family in their own right. Because for me, my thing is, of course, I love writing spectacle, but it doesn't mean anything if you don't feel anything for these characters.
Yeah.
So I felt that that emotional journey really helps Space Ghost stand apart because it's not like Batman in the sense that Batman, you have Batman and Robin, but there are plenty of stories where Batman's flying solo and it's not a big deal. But Space Ghost having three sidekicks, it felt like a very pointed statement to me. It felt like that is a character that doesn't work without those three sidekicks. That's what makes him stand apart. And so I view Space Ghost as kind of the ultimate single dad. He's a crime fighter who sort of through circumstance winds up having to protect these two kids and a monkey. And how does that change his life? How does that make him reckon with his own lost humanity? And how does that make him kind of grow and heal as a person? And the same thing for those kids. How do they kind of grow up under the wing of a superhero? And how does that kind of help them find meaning and direction in a universe that's taken so much from them? So yeah, it really is. It's a surrogate found family kind of story. So if you like work that I've done with those themes like Spencer and Locke or Savage Avengers, you're going to find a lot to love about Space Ghost.
So when Space Ghost first starts, what's the type of headspace that we can expect Space Ghost to be in?
Sure. Well, when you first meet him, he's a grim figure of the cosmos. He's somebody who through his own personal tragedies has been put on this mission of stopping space pirates and hijackers in the act. The universe is a big place and the Galactic Patrol can't possibly protect all the distant colonies out there. And that's really emboldened all the pirates. They're just hitting all these colonies and it doesn't matter what happens to the innocent scientists who are living there. And so Space Ghost, he knows what to do when he's in a room with a pirate. But you're going to see very quickly these kids, Jan and Jace, are really the X factor. And so he already is going to have to kind of adjust the way he does things from the very first issue. But yeah, it's going to be an adjustment for both Space Ghost and Jan and Jace to start. And there's going to be a little bit of friction in some of our opening issues before they start to grow on each other.
Do you have a character that you found to be the most fun to write? Was it Space Ghost? Was it the twins?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's the twins. I'm the older sibling of a set of triplets, and so writing
Wow.
multiples is something that's very near and dear to me. It really does kind of speak from my own lived experience. And so for me growing up, my younger siblings, they were only born a minute apart, but that minute really defined their entire hierarchy for they're almost 30 now. And so so having Jan, for example, she's the responsible one, she's the thoughtful one, as a lot of only girls in a family situation wind up becoming. But rather than sort of being docile, she's kind of feisty. She's the one who will tell Space Ghost to his face. She's a crack shot with a blaster. And Space Ghost, when Jan gets mad, he's kind of like, I would rather punch out an asteroid field than deal with the wrath of a 13-year-old girl.
Okay.
Jace, he's the goofy one. I wrote the twins as sort of Dick Grayson and Babs Gordon meets Lex and Tim from Jurassic Park. And so
Okay.
Jace, he's the impulsive one. He's the one who always has a joke. He's closer to maturity level to Blip than he is to Jan. But I love writing those twins because to them the way that they see the world is how they want to maintain what little family they have left.
Mm-hmm.
Jan feels like if she doesn't look out for everybody, then she'll lose what family she has. And meanwhile, Jace feels like if he doesn't keep everyone laughing, that they'll all go away. And so I think it's like a really sweet way of kind of approaching these two characters. And then of course Blip, who, like any great family pet, he's loyal to a fault, but he's also mischievous and food driven and has his own unique sense of humor, which you have to show purely through physical comedy because he doesn't speak.
Yep.
Having those characters, they really are kind of a yin and yang. They're very fun to explore. And then watching them play off Space Ghost as kind of the straight man, it's really fun because Space Ghost, I think that's what kind of helps set him apart. Is I think there's a heroic core to him. That's the reason why he takes in Jan and Jace. But at the same time, it's an inconvenience to suddenly become a single space dad of two and a monkey. And, that grates on him a little bit, especially at the beginning. And so watching everyone kind of feel each other out and learn each other's rhythms, that has been a real gift for me as a storyteller. And that's the reason why I love writing this book so much.
I think the two things that I connect with the most and what you said is like I completely understand that dynamic because I am the youngest, and me and my family, we lost I also lost my mom and my stepmom, and one of my coping mechanisms was always being funny, was always trying to keep the conversation alive and trying to keep the spirits high because I felt like once the mood fell down, everything would fall apart, and that's something that you can connect with really, really well as the youngest child. But also at the same time, now that you said that he reminds me of Tim from Jurassic Park, all I'm gonna think about is something's gonna happen. Like he's gonna get the electric fence scene. Something's gonna happen, and you're gonna be like, "Oh, kid, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it," and then he's gonna do it.
Just wait. issue 5.
It's my
Uh,
electric fence.
uh, so yeah, well, they're just really wonderful characters to write. I have such a blast writing them, and I think they really provide the necessary contrast for this kind of book. I know there's a lot of people who worry, oh, are they doing a grim and gritty reboot of Space Ghost? And I would say that's not the case. Tonally, like I said, we're somewhere between Batman the Animated Series and Batman the Long Halloween. But I think it's having Jan and Jace that kind of leavens our series. They provide this real through line of warmth and wonder and humor and heart to Space Ghost and his life and his universe. And so that's why I always bristle at people saying, oh, is this a grim reboot? Is no, I'd say it's a traditional superhero take. But when you have characters like Jan and Jace and Blip, I think there's a core of joy to the book that I think really makes it transcend any sort of grim and gritty storytelling.
And I feel like right now there is a lot of grim and dark storytelling that we're in need for a space epic, like a
Yeah.
really, really good space epic that just keeps everybody enthralled. That's why, like, just reading, like, knowing and keeping up with Tom Taylor's Nightwing right now and seeing how
Yeah.
that is getting ready to take such a turn into something that is very, very morbid and dark. It's like, okay, Nightwing has been really kind of like in the best place that it's been. And it's like almost like I need to find something else to read that day because I want to make sure like I finish my day being in like a healthier headspace, because I know that when you have an arc called Fallen Grace and you're like, oh, okay, it's gonna be, I don't know, I
Yeah.
don't want to be sad right now. It's like voluntarily watching My Girl. Like
She's very funny. I mean, I think, my favorite books growing up, Devin Grayson's Batman Gotham Knights is kind of the
Mhm.
Rosetta Stone for a lot of the work that I do. You might be able to find some of it still on Amazon. I know they did 2 trade paperback collections, but that was really a series about watching Batman and his emotional connections with the people around him, whether it was with Nightwing or with Oracle or with Spoiler. There's a great issue with Batman and Spoiler, or Superman or Aquaman. There's a great story about Batman. Basically, there's no crime in Gotham, and what does he do for a night? And he's basically bugging all of his sidekicks to try to fight crime, and there's no crime to fight, and they're just like, we want the night off. And so he eventually has like Aquaman try to fish out a giant penny out of his out of the Bat Cave, and by the end of it, Aquaman's like, did you just want to watch a movie? Like, we could just watch a movie. Um,
I actually
and
love that.
it's a wonderful comic.
What was it called again?
Batman Gotham Knights by
Okay.
Devin Grayson and Roger Robinson. It was coming out in the early 2000s, and it's some of the best Batman writing I've ever read, and it really informed a lot of my approach to character.
Wow.
I love writing sad characters who like kind of claw their way out.
No,
Uh,
and you could see that in Moon Knight. That
yeah,
when we talk about, well, when I say like there are, because I feel like down the line, eventually I would, maybe one day try to figure out how to write a comic. And I
sure,
feel like two particular superheroes that I like mentally can't get my head around to like actually do a book about them would be Moon Knight and Batman, because I
sure.
feel like they just require like your headspace during that entire book. I like he had to have been watching or just at least involving himself in some very, very, very dark and gritty things, and that's for a substantial amount of time.
Yeah. I watched for City of the Dead. It wasn't until I rewatched the movie Man on Fire that
Ooh,
they kind of like the everything clicked. Whereas, you watch Denzel Washington's character in Man on Fire, and this is somebody who had worked in, I believe, in the CIA, and he'd done some dirty stuff, and he clearly felt felt guilty about it, to the point where he's playing around with the pistol and the bullet winds up misfiring in his gun, and he sees that as like, oh, maybe there's a reason why I need to still be here.
mm-hmm.
And that was something that really kind of spoke to me about Moon Knight. Is, yeah, Moon Knight was a guy, he was a bad guy,
Yeah.
and he dies trying to do the right thing for like the first time, and that's what brings him back, and suddenly he's got a second chance, and he's using all those skills that he picked up as a bad man to try to do something right. And that really speaks to me. I think that's such a cool character arc, and I would say Space Ghost is not nearly as grim as anybody like Moon Knight. He's a guy who he's the sole survivor of his planet. He is the victim of space piracy and interstellar violence, and so he's been living on this spaceship graveyard known as the Ghost Planet for years, and he's been fighting this lonely war on crime, trying to sort of save other people from experiencing the same tragedy that he has. And when he encounters Jan and Jace, he sees, I think, even subconsciously, a sort of mirroring tragedy. They're very complementary in their way. And I think that's really the galvanizing force behind this partnership between Space Ghost, Jan, and Jace, and what makes them, I think, a perfect found family.
They in a way are they're puzzle pieces where they didn't exactly know they needed one another, but they're not gonna they as much as they want to pull themselves apart from one another, they're the perfect fit. So they're gonna be sticking together, kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is that's why I feel like Space Ghost just has so much potential, and that's why I'm so excited to read it too because it's been first of all in the grand scope of I'm in the phase of my comics reading where I'm telling everybody if you have a good story that I need to read, please just throw it at me. And my first instinct was I'm ready to take Space Ghost seriously.
Thank you.
When I made a video about him, I think last month,
Mhm.
and the first thing that people started saying in the comments were, "Yeah, let's fucking do this. Let's
Yeah,
see, I'm ready for this." That's why, also when I think about it, it's I want this book to do well because I think that it can do well, and I'm ready for this story because of what's been leaked out to me, like what you've put out there. The
yeah.
moment where Jan and Jace have to say goodbye to their dad, and their dad hands them the pistol, you're just sitting there okay, one of my objectives will be to not spoil the chapter, but to give moments like that away and be like, look at
Yeah.
this.
Yeah. I mean, the thing for me was, when Dynamite approached me for this, and as I was rewatching the original episodes of Space Ghost, the big question for me was tone. You see the original 1966 series, it came out right on the heels of Adam West's Batman. It was very much told in the style and tone of the time, which is kind of the Silver Age camp. And for me, I see Space Ghost as having all the ingredients of an absolute A-list character. He's got the design, he's got the powers, he's got the sidekicks, he's got the villains. And so for me, it was how do we take all those ingredients and take all that energy and vibes from the original 66 show? And how do we tell that to a brand new generation of readers in the year 2024? So just like Space Ghost in 1966 was very much a product of its time. I'm trying to bring that character into what are the storytelling sensibilities of today. And so that's the reason why, we're trying to bring him back to his roots, but also to show readers what they've been missing. That this really is, he's more than just Batman in space. He's got such a sprawling, amazing universe and cast filled with just endless potential. And I can't wait to be the one to show readers exactly how deep that potential goes.
And I really do think that this you definitely have the literary capability of bringing people that have this potential lack of familiarity with Space Ghost, that everyone grew up, kind of knowing he was a late night talk show host, and actually bring him into understanding that this guy is actually like a bounty hunter, or he's a cop, a space cop that has been taking down pirates. And the villains that you thought were just campy, one-off villains from a TV show are actually extremely fearsome pirates and ravagers that take down planets, which I am fully ready for. And honestly, I'd like to thank you for coming by today. I will tell you, I have my copy pre-ordered. I'm driving 10 miles to a non-local LCS to pick it up.
I appreciate
No, I think it was Ram V actually sent me a comic shop locator,
it.
and I pumped it in. And I'm like, dude, I must live in the middle of nowhere. There's not one comic book shop within 10 miles. I got to drive 30 minutes. Like, that's not an LCS. Like, I was like, I
Well,
didn't.
I appreciate you making the trip for us. I
Absolutely.
appreciate everybody listening. Tell your local comic shop. You can still pre-order Space Ghost issue 2 at your local comic shop, and issue 3 will be up in pre-order soon. We've got some really fun stuff planned, so I can't wait for you to see what we've got coming.
All right. Well, David, thank you very much for coming by the bar. I appreciate you. And I really am looking forward to Space Ghost coming out in May.
Thank you so much for having me.
Today's episode of At the Bar was not sponsored by anyone because Dunkaroos has yet to respond to my emails. Be sure to pick up Space Ghost #1 when it hits your local comic book store May 1st, or on Dynamite's website directly. I put the link in the description down below. And if you could think of anyone else you'd like to see at the bar, let me know in the comments. And be sure to subscribe and follow me on Twitter. And until next time, cheers.